Well, hey, welcome back to Construction Conversations. We are here this week with Conley and Gary. Welcome to the show, guys. How you doing?
Doing good. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, man. Lars, it looks like you found a new shed to perch up at
That's correct.
today.
I'm continuing my tradition of a new background that is
S-
authentic and real,
Did you
not
just
fake.
hang up those cords behind you just to add in another kind of layer of authenticity?
Actually, no, I went over to my neighbor's suite and ripped them out of the warehouse
Yeah,
there, and now threw them behind me.
I
Nice.
love that.
Bring them over to scrap after the call ends.
Totally. Times are
Well,
tough.
Well, guys, I think we've chatted before. I've kind of followed the Raise Robotics story for a little bit. I think Conley and I met at a kind of an event in up in Toronto, and I really like what you guys are doing, and we'll kind of dig into maybe your approach to the market. But what we like to do is at least hear let's hear the origin story. Who is Raise Robotics? How did you guys come together? Would also be an interesting kind of element of that story, but. Yeah, maybe I don't know who wants to start. Can you guys kind of tell who is Raise Robotics?
Do you want to give a shot, Conley, or do you want me to take it away?
Yeah, I was working at Waymo, and Gary was working in construction. Just kidding. He messaged me randomly on LinkedIn back in 2021, January of 2021.
Yeah, it's
Just
been a while.
weird, random outreach, trying to figure out why construction typically exceeded budgets and why there weren't robots currently being deployed within construction. I
Yeah.
think it was, his background, Gary's background being at Waymo and in the autonomous vehicle industry. Obviously, it's much further advanced
Yeah.
than construction technology at the end of the day. And it started as kind of just an honest conversation. We'd meet weekly. I was still working in crane and rigging, and then Gary was still at Waymo. And for a year, we would put together different use case applications of robots in construction, and I would pitch it to my existing customers that I was selling and leasing cranes to. And once we got to building facades, I realized that there's a high component of standardization, and it's broadly applicable across the United States and globally. And it was a conversation that was, if you can build it, this is something that we would buy and we'd deploy. And then kind of just took it from there and ran with it, got into an accelerator program, and then we both quit our jobs and went full time with it.
Man, it's just like the story goes. That's pretty cool. Waymo, I will say I drove my in or rode in my first Waymo a few months back in Austin. It was a delightful experience. So Gary, I appreciate your work. Thank you.
I just did a very small part of it, but it was a great company to work at.
Yeah. And so you guys come together via LinkedIn message, which maybe is a shout out to LinkedIn Messenger. I feel like no one I find that to be a highly ineffective tool, but maybe you're a counterpoint to that reality.
I'm just
It's
glad
just about how
Conley did
much time.
Yeah.
So no, so Gary, so were you a grad student at the time? Like, so you didn't know Conley, you just decided to reach out to some random guy on LinkedIn, and
Was it the
that's
mustache? What attracted you?
stop,
Why did you
stop,
reach out to
stop,
Conley?
stop.
Well, I think
It's an honest question. There's a lot of people he could have reached out to.
yeah. I mean, I think Conley all I saw was LinkedIn page, but I mean, it seemed like an interesting profile because he had a bit of experience at Apple doing manufacturing before going construction, and I thought it would be a really good combination. And he was also one of the few people who actually didn't think I was a bot and replied, so that helped as well.
The truth comes out. He was reaching out to others, Conley. You
Oh,
weren't
I
just the
know.
only
I
one.
know.
I
You were the one that
no.
replied. So you guys kind of come together and are kind of working kind of in stealth mode for a little bit. And I really like what you said, Conley, which is you have this kind of you have this exposure to the job site and you're starting to kind of look at different kind of consistent processes or workflows through the lens of how a robot solution would kind of integrate and add value. And maybe what were the iterations from there? Did you try a bunch of different workflows and kind of settle on one, or did you lean really heavily into one?
I think we started by analyzing my projects and where I typically saw projects that had exceeded the allotment for rental time. So what traditionally ran overtime, in turn, what made me the most money at the end of the day,
Mm,
as well as which scopes of work traditionally had the highest incident rates, because there were kind of trends that I had begun noticing across our projects, specifically in volumetric construction, that once you start prefabricating components and shipping them to site, you're handling much larger materials in more confined spaces. You have a lot more struck by, pinch by incidents. So kind of went down that thought process, broke it down into heavy civil applications, so looking at bridge girder installations, looking at actual modular housing construction, as well as other volumetric. Went into wind farms and wind farm erection, and then it was facades was kind of the final thing for us. But definitely workshopped quite a few ideas. Heard a lot of very firm no's, or this is a dumb idea. It's never going to work. But again, once we did get to our beachhead market, we got good traction and good customer feedback.
Who with regards to like who you were interviewing, is that what ultimately led to your discovery on who your ideal customer is, and sort of not just a product focus, but more so a specific type of subcontractor or type of project?
hmm Yes, to both. Yeah, the initial conversations really created the role spec for what we were looking for in a customer, and also
Yeah.
kind of showed us what we don't want in a customer. I think with a lot of robotics companies, especially VC funded ones, there is an assumption that you need to be targeting the biggest of the big in order to, raise funds and scale the business.
Yeah.
What we found is that working with a lot of those, top 10 E&R guys, it leads to a lot of latency in communications, latency in actually getting the equipment out, and then it doesn't necessarily guarantee a conversion across that entire organization.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of molded our ideal role spec for a customer, being that medium-sized contractor that can really see the benefits of technology integration into their workflows.
I mean, Conley, that's a pretty like mature and that's a pretty mature like analysis of like a go-to-market strategy, considering like you're already thinking about a bad fit sale. What in your background or your collective background, you and Gary, enabled you guys to take first like a data-driven approach to discovery and trying to find out where the solution lives, but then also, hey, let's think about strategically how we go to market. Like, did you guys learn that along the way?
Yeah, I would say 90% of our business has been forced learnings.
That's
You're kind of just thrown into the fire and you either figure it out or fail, and then iterate, learn quickly, and redeploy. That's kind of the basis for our company at the end of the day. But it comes with lumps on the head. We did have, I would say, less than ideal customers, and it leads to less than ideal outputs for both the customer adopting and for the technology provider.
yeah. I mean, I've worked in a number of tech companies that didn't learn that lesson, that there are bad fit sales, right? And that is the demise of many a startup. And so kudos for coming to that realization. But sorry for cutting you off, Lars.
No, it's okay. I want to ask Gary a question, because I'm massively intrigued by, sort of founding story, which originated with LinkedIn, right, and a mustache apparently. But Gary, what at Waymo were you doing, and why or how construction, right? Like, what pointed you over there? What was the spark?
Yeah, at Waymo, I worked on this team called evaluation. So it's kind of like a weird team, but basically the goal of the, I guess, software we were developing is to understand whether the software in the car itself was making the right decisions at scale. So basically, like if you have a lot of different types of algorithms, like both learning based and non-learning based, and you feed all of them into like now controlling the car, driving these very diverse environments, it's hard to tell if you make a change in your software, whether you're actually improving the car overall or you're making improvements in certain areas and degradations in others. And so the goal of the evaluation team was to understand that type of behavior at scale using like very data-driven methods, again, like different types of algorithms and models. And yeah, I mean, that was, I think, a very interesting, I would say, like experience for me, because it, I think, made me a lot more realistic than I would say like a typical robotics engineer, because I could see like where all the problems
Mm-hmm.
driving hard, and I'd spend like I would say like probably like at least 10 hours every week just looking at logs and seeing like what goes wrong. So that was a very fun experience, and that I think that's definitely helped with starting a construction robotics company, being very realistic about like what's accomplishable and what it actually takes to get that to that level of reliability. As far as like why construction, I think it was just always been an interesting space for me. I did some work around the house, like a lot of people probably have. But I also got some experience when I was growing up doing some rigging work with my parents because they did some entertainment work where they had to set up signs. And so that's actually one of the areas where I didn't mention is one of the reasons I reached out to Conley because he used to work in the crane rigging industry, and that's actually one of the first things we explored is doing some work in that space.
Mm,
So
fascinating.
I want to dig into robotics and construction, but
Mhm.
I do also want to just maybe pause so that the broader audience can maybe understand what is Raise Robotics in terms of the solution today. So like, can you guys maybe give just a really quick, like, what is it? What's the solution? What does it solve for today?
Yeah. So we developed what's known as a mobile manipulator. So it's basically a robot arm on wheels that can drive around and do work. We automate just very simple repetitive tasks, things like drawing lines, drilling holes, installing components, scanning the site. But we do this in areas that are really hard for people to reach. So think like on the edge of a building or where you need to be on a ladder or a scissor lift. And that's where a lot of the benefits of our applications come in. We're working in these hard to reach areas. Construction safety has improved a lot, but you have to wear a lot of safety equipment, which is very time consuming. It still can be hazardous in certain situations. And we see that people tend to make mistakes because, when you're on top of a ladder, it's very hard to do your work very accurately if you're trying to balance at the same time.
I think it's a connection or it's at the intersection of a few different things that I think
Mhm.
can provide a lot of value. So I think that's helpful. When we kind of look at robotics and construction, and we mentioned this in our previous conversation, I think people tend to oscillate between either end of a spectrum. Either robotics is going to take all the jobs, which, what does that really mean? Or like robotics, I watched the videos of the Boston Dynamics robot falling downstairs, so it's obviously never going to do anything. And obviously, there's a lot in between. Um, but from folks in the industry on the robotics side, what is kind of the state of robotics in construction?
Yeah. So on the falling downstairs, I think every good robot needs to fall once. If your robot hasn't fallen
Yeah,
before, you're not testing it enough.
I like that.
But as far as like state of robotics today, I think with the construction industry, it's still definitely early. I think it's interesting because it's an industry where you saw like a big wave of research back in the late 1900s in robotics, and there were actually a decent number of attempts to try to automate certain scopes of work out on site. I think a lot of the research papers I've seen have come out of Japan, a lot of the large Japanese GCs funding in-house research, but it hasn't really gone into site until the last couple of years. And even
Mhm.
still, I think there's only a limited number of companies that have really demonstrated commercial viability, like actually using the robots to do work and generate revenue. Um, but I do think that the outlook is really positive these next couple years. Um, One of the biggest challenges in any robotics field that where you're dealing with unstructured environments has always just been cost of sensing. Things like lidars, high quality cameras, force torque sensors. These things have been really expensive over the last couple of decades, but in the last 5 years, partly because of the push in autonomous vehicles, a lot of the costs for these sensors have dropped, and that now makes it a lot easier to develop a cost competitive solution for automation in construction.
Love it. So, Stephen, you got a follow up question? Go for it.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I was thinking here, where do you see, and I love I love how you bring in innovation in autonomous vehicles, right? That drive towards autonomous vehicles there that then is transferring over into these other areas, right? 100% love it. How do you see the challenges around, and I'm going to try to draw correlation to Stephen, what you said, which is, robots taking over the job site, which you and I both know, that'll never happen, at least not anytime soon, um, to this big push towards pre prefab. And where do you see robots and this push towards prefab sort of coming together? Because I think, is that the next sort of point where, you know, listen, we don't need a specific drywall robot or this robot or that, but is there, do you see it heading or trending in that direction? Do you see opportunity?
Yeah, I'll share my thoughts first, and then I think Conley has some good points on this too. One thing I will share is that like our first customers and also the customers we work most with are all prefab companies, but we do on-site robotics for them. One of the challenges in prefab is that now that you're prefabricating components, you can't modify them on site, right? Like you're not gonna take like a 10-foot concrete wall and try to cut a foot off of it to get things to fit. And so then your installation tolerances on site become a lot tighter and mistakes get a lot more expensive. And so that is actually an opportunity for automation because you kind of need to hit that level of repeatability and precision in order to make sure that your projects stay on schedule and go according to plan. And the plan is now a lot more important than if you were doing everything on site.
Well, hey, go ahead, Colin.
Conley got his 2 cents. Let's hear it.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's the prefab market. It's a tough market. I mean, you need to be an exceptional craftsman in the factory and have very good foresight into your as-built conditions. Like Gary had said, there's so many challenges with the match between what is essentially a manufacturing tolerance offsite and then matching that to an as-built condition that is loose, to say the best. So unless you have accurate means or methods to actually, figure out where your structure is and where your components are going to do, which can be unlocked with robots and even just, RTSs, total stations, it's really hard to get things to fit properly. It's something that we see, with our customers being the facade space, they're all precast panels that are, not precast, prefab panels that are going to the job sites. And it's a constant struggle where you're matching what is theoretically a perfect tolerance against concrete tolerance. That's tough. I do think longer term, there is a very real opportunity for integrating robots in hazardous environments to complete volumetric installations. And we are getting leads in that area right now for completing electrical connections between volumetric, completing the actual welded connections, and any physical connections between these units. Because if you're familiar with volumetric construction, it's just workers working at extremely high risk in any aspect of the installation. You're either going to be in a man basket outside, or you're going to be standing on a temporary structure, essentially. So it's high risk, and it's definitively an application that robotics can help with in the future. But I think there does need to be a little bit of a meeting in the middle between both the builder and the robotics provider. And there's going to be connection types that are more well suited for a robot versus a human, and the latter as well. So that is kind of a thought process that is going around the industry right now, specifically in volumetric, is how you can accommodate design changes to improve for robotic installation long term. I think this is within the last year, it's the first time that I've heard these conversations starting to spin up from manufacturers and from builders on how they can accommodate changes to their own designs to accommodate robotics long term.
Well, and I think we all could kind of come or become attuned to how software works. Like, hey, if we have a good idea and then we break down the idea and then we develop an agile schedule and then we go and ship the product, right? And I think that's where our brains don't naturally understand the hardware world. And so when you're looking at these opportunities, even from a lead standpoint, it isn't as easy as say, okay, let's break down the requirements for this new feature. There's obviously a lot more that goes into it, and as it's a mixture of software and hardware. So when you look at these opportunities, how do you guys evaluate whether or not it either fits within the current capabilities of your robot, or if you're going to do a net new platform? Like, how do you think through that from a go-to-market standpoint and just from like an engineering standpoint?
Yeah, I think one thing on the requirements side, I would say that it's not so much that you can't put the requirements down on paper and get that to work. It's that it's really hard to get all of the requirements that you need physically into a single place. And that's really what's different between software and hardware. It's just the variability with the physical world, it's a lot higher, right? Like if I were to build a robot that had no perception and just have it follow the same path over and over again. Well, the instant the concrete is slightly out of tolerance, there's like a pipe in the way that wasn't in the drawings, or somebody put a net up to try to protect against objects, and now it's in the way of the robot. All of these things will basically break the system, and that's, I think, where it's just really hard to approach it the same way as like a typical software project. You need to actually, and that's where I would say like what we typically try to do is always just get out in the field, and see exactly what these applications look like, because that's where you learn a lot. We force everybody in our company to go out in the field, including all the software engineers. Everybody needs to be like walking projects, seeing exactly what's going on, and that's where you can really then make determinations on what's feasible and what's not.
Yeah,
I
it's a
think also
powerful cultural component.
talking to the field staff is of paramount importance when you're sussing out these applications as well. We often find, the executive that might have requested the new application might be a little disjointed from the actual feelings that are being held out in the field. The challenges that are seen at a high level might not be exactly what the problem is in the field. But yeah, I think just
Wait, that
field
happens?
exposure and
That
iterate.
happens? Conley, that
I'm
here's
just
the
saying
Hold
theoretically, I
on.
can see that
saying
could happen.
got it. Got it. It
Oh
could, but
man,
it really
it,
doesn't. So I
it
get it.
doesn't ever happen, but
Doesn't.
it could.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Never a miscommunication in construction, as they always say.
So here's a question. We think about robotics in construction, and I spent a little time in maybe the R&D side on it with a GC, and when I was evaluating different robotic solutions, obviously I was looking at it from an R&D perspective, but I was looking for applications that had a real world ROI value to it, right? And so this is maybe a difficult question, but I'll ask it anyways. When you think about maybe just the state of robotics in construction, what percentage of the solutions in market right now, whether you're talking like the Canvas thing, or any application of Spot, what percentage of robotics in construction would you categorize as R&D versus a commercially ready product?
I would say like most of the solutions are somewhere in between, in that
Yeah.
commercial readiness and construction is a little tougher because every project is a little different. But I will say that any solutions that you see working out today are definitely generating value, because if they weren't, they would be gone from the industry already. There's not
Yeah, it's
a lot
fair.
of applications.
Yeah,
So
right.
I think like anything that you see still being deployed is valuable. It might not be used on every single project. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. So maybe going back to your kind of go to market and deployment strategy, one of the things I appreciated about what you guys are doing is also thinking through, and I think you guys have already mentioned it. There's a sensitivity to the dynamics of the job site, which I think separates you just in that fact alone, and not just understanding the dynamics, but also being respectful of the variability, right? And so I think some of that is informed what deployment looks like for your solution, which is not just dropping it off and wishing the best, but also kind of offering some services. Can you guys talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think as we've completed more and more projects, I mean, there's additional value that robotics brings outside of just what is being sold on paper at the end of the day. I mean, and that's kind of unlocked additional revenue models for us. So we started as a full service, contractor at the end of the day, working for subcontractors and now working for some self-performed GCs. So we're providing staff to oversee the robots, but they don't need to oversee the robots for the entirety of their time on site. There's additional tasks that they can knock out that are tangential to our scope of work, and then also thinking about the data being collected from the robots. We didn't understand what the robot was collecting was valuable to anyone until we showed a customer on accident. And I was like, oh, this is where my concrete is versus where it's supposed to be. Like, this is an inspection of our structure, and you guys are just withholding this information? Like, we'll pay for it. So
Interesting.
I don't. It's always being, you got to keep the ears open when you're on site, and over communicate what you're doing. And that unlocks a lot of new revenue streams
Yeah.
for you. a solutions provider.
Are you guys, just dealing in, say, type 1 concrete, or is there any wood framing sort of activities you guys do? All the above?
So traditionally, Type 1 for the time being, we are going through a redesign now that'll unlock some of those smaller projects and, 3-on-1 podiums
Yep.
and compliant with the structural qualifications or requirements for equipment moving on the elevated wood decking. That's the most difficult thing for us right now, but we do have foresight into new models releasing in Q4.
What did you say was the most difficult thing?
I would say strength to weight, and you want the robots to work as high and as far as possible, but at the same time, you got to be cognizant of your floor loading, make sure you're not overloading your structure, and
Just from a robot standpoint, you mean?
Exactly, just a hardware design standpoint.
So how much does your robot weigh? And do you have different models that you guys are experimenting with to meet those objectives?
Mm-hmm. Right now, we're about the same size as your small spider crane, so just under 1,600 pounds. The beauty of that is that you don't have to run ground bearing pressures at each single setup on an elevated slab. That was the bane of my existence when I was renting spider cranes. I got to do a complete path of travel and then run a calculation on every single setup location. It's exhaustive. At the end of the day, I wouldn't want to do that. So yeah, it was definitely a driving consideration for us in the mechanical design. And then back to your question on kind of like the trim lines. Yes, I think when you're building a multi-purpose robot, it's impossible to build something that works perfectly for every application. That just is what it is. But you can build different trims that are derivatives that maintain the same software, same localization, same robot software architecture, but reapply them to a variety of form factors, still servicing the same scopes of work, providing the same tooling, but just allowing you to access different areas of the project. So for us, this will lead to different derivatives of our robot. Right now, we're calling this like our edge robot. We're going to be doing a high lift robot that's going to be on a scissor lift, and then potentially in the future moving to a JLG boom lift that we're going to be retrofitting.
Do you have any names for your robots? Like, have you done any fun naming things?
This is a contentious area for the company.
So just so the listeners understand, Conley kind of smiled and looked away. Gary got really excited, and was like, "I can't wait to share the names."
So
clearly saw
this is going to be a segment.
So the names aren't anything bad. They're actually like one of our engineers suggested this. They get named after.
Do you want to settle it right now? Like Lars and I we have opinions.
Take a vote. Let's do a vote. Let's go.
All right.
Nope,
I'm ready.
Nope, they don't want to do that. They don't want to do that, Steven.
Up to Gary.
I'm sorry, Gary, keep going.
No worries. Well, they're named after architects, like more well-known architects, and but our problem is like now that we're building a lot more robots, we're trying to go to like a serial number scheme, but then
okay. Hold on. You mean the model isn't named after an architect? You mean each individual robot was named after a famous architect?
Yeah.
My mind was just blown. That's insane. That's very complex.
That's our.
Apparently, I voted.
Wait, so is there like a Frank Lloyd Wright on
There
site
right.
somewhere?
There's a right, yeah.
So how many architects do we got out there right now?
We're gonna have 8 this year, so
how many?
8, probably 10.
8? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, manageable, but
it's not. It's not. If there's 2 different names, I'm not.
I love Conley.
Following.
This is fascinating, Stephen. We somehow stumbled upon this gem. Listen. If you got 8 kids, you can remember their names.
No.
Problem is, you in the space and the direction you guys are going, you're going to have a lot more than 8 kids, right? So that's not sustainable.
You got to go to
right
numbers.
now,
I'm at 4 kids, and I'm already thinking about numbering them. So,
well, actually, a lot of the AV companies were naming their cars up to like 50 names.
Really?
Yeah.
No, I'm in Conley's court with this one, and he clearly, again, for our listeners, he is very passionate about this. I see it in his eyes, burning.
Listen,
yes.
Founders is a marriage, and I think we touched on something that
big. This boardroom talk.
I'm very passionate about this, and I think the entirety of our team feels the exact opposite of my passion. But it's like, if I was renting mobile cranes, like I memorized every single specific crane by the trim line name and then the numbering convention for the serial number after it. Like I knew exactly what was going where. I knew who was going in what. I'm not saying, yeah, you're going to be in right today. You're going to be in gang
Yeah.
today.
Well, when we
You
release
want to know
this
what's
on
fascinating?
LinkedIn, we're going to
Hold on.
include a poll.
This is good. We could do that, Stephen, actually. And we could also help you name future robots if for some reason the numbering schema doesn't work out, Conley. Okay, that'd be a sad day, but we could help with, future, characters. So what's fascinating, and I noticed this when I was running my company, the accounting team would only refer to projects in their project number. Period. It was always project number. But the ops team typically called it by like whatever they, Hilton, Hilton Bayfront or 49 ECB or it's Skiff 13. It's so there was always this like sort of how well this group looks at it this way and this group looks at it this way, but they both equal each other. So fascinating, you guys are dealing with that. Yeah, this is great. I love it.
I don't know.
I
I
mean,
think if you send it out to the larger committee, this is how the Navy ended up with a ship called Bodie McBoatface. Like that would be
yeah,
our
that's
robot.
true. Yeah. I had the same exact thought,
Boatface.
Conley. You can't let the public into
Can't have anything
nomenclature.
nice.
Oh, this is great.
Uh,
This is fascinating.
so I do. I mean, these are like the founder moments
Yeah.
that I think are appreciated because like you guys are weaving a tale and we get to join you a little bit. So, but I do want to talk about kind of the from a go-to-market standpoint. We were talking about R&D a little bit. And there is, I mean, it's hard to sell from an R&D platform, we'll say, in this industry because one, there's not a ton of R&D funds historically. There are two, like your point, Conley, there isn't a lot of patience for R&D kind of category type solutions. And so you guys are really forced to provide day one value. And I think that's what I really like about you focusing on a solution that in a workflow that really is needed, right? Like edge of slab kind of stuff is really interesting, and there's like a safety element there. But maybe to zoom out a little bit, as you guys are having these conversations in market, understanding what's a bad fit sale, um, is a lot of the pushback, or is any of the pushback that there isn't budget or there isn't patience? Like, what are the historical constraints that you guys are coming up against as you guys are going to market?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're looking at, pure R&D, like first customer, first transaction, that was a constant battle for us, where it's like it's a chicken and an egg problem for a startup, especially a hardware startup, where it's like we need money to build the hardware. In order to receive said money, we need to have customers. In order to have customers, we need to have a product. And it's like just this roundabout. And it's just about kind of,
Yeah.
breaking loose. I do think, finding the right customer allows you to alleviate yourself from a lot of that acute stress. And then segmenting and breaking down the application into low-hanging fruit. What's the immediate value that you can add and the most cost-effective way to get there as a startup? That's kind of how we traditionally break it down.
Did any of the, sorry, go ahead, Lars.
No, your question is going to be a lot more insightful. Mine was more fun, but go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, does any of the like industry-based VCs help with that problem? Like, and not that you need to like call any of them out, but like
Yeah.
that's ideally that's their role, right? Is to lean into these types of opportunities.
Yes. But yes, they have helped us. I mean, we wouldn't be here if it weren't for, industry specific VCs. But it's still tough to get them to
Yeah.
lean in. At the end of the day, you still need to have something signed. Even if you
Yeah.
haven't made a transaction, you need to have LOIs, and they need to have visibility to ultimately de-risk the entirety of your company and the investment at the end of the day.
So talk to me about your first sale, because I love the chicken or the egg, right? And clearly your forehead's probably flat, bloodied at this point. You're exhausted, but someone was like, "Oh heck yeah, this is interesting. Let's give these guys a shot." Talk to us about that. And then I got a follow on for that. So go ahead.
Yes, first project was with DPR. Shout out to Henning in Hard Hat Robotics. It was when he was still the head of innovation for them. and I think we had met him at a networking event or something, just walked him through what we were doing.
Oh, that was actually a VC intro. So yes, it did help us a lot.
Hey, it counts. It
Yeah.
still counts. Henning's a good dude, though.
He's
I like his
excellent.
rockstar glasses.
I do too. But yeah, he ended up facilitating our first, proof of concept test with DPR. And I think in hindsight, didn't go good. um, but it's iterative. You learn from
But
it, you overcome it.
when you say it didn't go very good,
We installed, I think at the time we installed one plastic bolt, and that
Yeah,
was it. We
I think
used
some
mocked up
hours.
components. That was kind of our.
Gary's laughing. Gary's losing his mind right now. This is good.
It was the
Yeah, that
first
was
time Gary used fall protection. It was for
Do
what?
you have a picture of that?
Yeah.
Can you send it to us, please?
Yeah.
That's gonna be the.
Okay.
Man, this is great.
So what's interesting is here you are. You've got a concept. It doesn't exist yet. You need you sort of need that contract to create the thing that you've been okay. So now all of a sudden
Mhm.
people are like, yeah, let's give it a shot. You do it, and you're like, yeah, it didn't work that well. But now you got feedback, right?
Yes.
And that's what
Exactly.
you were sort of
Feedback.
looking for the whole time.
Exactly. It's a very tiered approach. I mean, you're not gonna have a perfect product out of the
Right.
gate. It's obvious. But I think the one thing that we did do good early on is being very transparent with the customers. It's not gonna be perfect. As long as you can see the vision and share the vision with us, we will get there, but it will take time. So, I mean, we weren't actively, seeking invoices on the first 3 projects we were on, and it was until the customer was comfortable, this did in fact add value, and I'm comfortable cutting the check on it. That's when we started scaling up the sales after that. That's when we knew, there is something here, we are adding value.
So that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing. And my follow up question was actually going to be sort of talking about like ROI, right? Like what? So talk to us about that initial ROI, right? Where you finally found that tipping point to like maybe now where you're at. Because clearly, with 8 architects rolling around out there, decent sized weight, there's got to be some momentum growing.
Yeah, there is, and the ROI is definitely improving as well. So I think it circles back to both, improved technology and the commoditization of sensors. Like the cost of building our robots has decreased over time. I mean, in just 3.5 years, things have become significantly cheaper and easier to build. So that's one part of it, and then you compound it on top of it with, better technology at the end of the day, allowing the robot to move faster, move more confidently, see things better, and just be quicker on the whip when it's actually out in the field. And right now we just got the results back from a previous project that we wrapped up about a month ago. That was with Jared Butler out at St. Jude in Memphis. We were out there for about 6 months, and we took off 2.5 months of their schedule. Ended up saving the money, and the reason that we were called to come out there is, within the first 2 floors, they had over 100 grand in rework that had already been passed through.
Okay. How did they find you, or did you find them? Did you guys already know each other?
We had already known each other, and we were actually on another one of their projects. And then that PX had called us and was like, "Hey,
Go."
come in."
They're like, get
Yeah.
down there,
So
fix
Gary
this.
and I flew to Nashville, picked up the robot, threw it in a truck, and then drove it over and delivered it ourselves.
Did Gary have to wear fall protection?
Not that
haven't had
time.
to-
The robots have improved.
Yeah, I haven't had to wear cross protection since 2022. I mean, it's literally no working at the edge anymore.
So Gary, who are you? Like, who's your ideal customer in that massive $1 trillion spend of construction a year here, like that industry? Like, who's your ideal customer?
Yeah, right now I think the first market that we're really focused on are commercial buildings. We do things like hospitals.
But how many stories? Like all type one, how many stories? It doesn't matter.
We
We've
don't
done as little,
discriminate.
Okay.
Yeah.
we've done as
We
little
still
as
see benefit.
Because I have a feeling after this, after we publish this podcast, you guys are gonna get thousands of calls. Okay, I mean, we got millions of subscribers. Don't
That's
laugh,
right.
Gary.
I
Don't,
hope so.
Conley, I saw your mustache. Don't do that. No, point being, I mean, like, hey, I should go check these guys out because they're solving problems on the projects that I do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think, I mean, you guys are refreshing, I think, in a lot of ways. because there's an authenticity to the story, there's an authenticity to the approach to the market, and I think we've all become, I think, a little numb to the founder who's like the hustle grind it culture, like posting on LinkedIn while they're like doing rap. Like I don't need more of that, right? And I think what you guys are saying is like we're approaching the market. We have a solution. We're going to iterate around your feedback. We're going to produce value. We're going to flex around the needs and dynamics of the job site. Like that's a really unique value tail there that I can appreciate. Um, I don't know if there's a question other than like just a high five, but yeah, well done. Um, I think to maybe continue kind of that line of questioning though, like as you look to grow, you guys are starting to maybe see some product market fit around where the application is providing value. You mentioned that you've got some other leads and opportunities coming in that maybe flex and kind of allow you to pivot. What does the growth scale for a hardware company look like? I've worked at one before, and it's a very different scaling path than what I've been used to. So like, what's the next part of your journey look like?
Yeah, I mean, we want to continue focus, growing with our current customers as like I think our first priority. They've stuck with us for a while, and we want to continue to work with them, making sure we're delivering the best results we can for them. As far as like, scaling our fleet goes, it's yeah, unlike software, it's not like you don't get a hockey stick. It's more like a line that goes straight up and towards the right. And so it's just about putting more and more robots on more and more projects every month. We're currently drafting up some plans for the new version that Conley described. That's going to go into more mass production, where we'll produce like kind of a couple dozen of them next year. We are also getting some requests for new applications. Like for example, we started working with a general contractor here in the Bay Area to use a new manufacturer, the concrete drill, to actually help retrofit old warehouses. Basically drilling a bunch of holes when they're undergrounding utilities. They have to re-pour concrete. We're also designing that new form factor, which will be modular, where we can kind of take it off and put it onto a scissor lift. And so then we can do a lot of the exact same work that we're doing today, like drilling, layout, scanning, assembly, overhead. And that's something that we're currently looking at, working with some of the existing customers and potentially some new customers to deploy.
That's cool. So it's a lot better than we're going to add a ChatGPT plugin in Q3. Which, but maybe there's a serious question there. When you think about AI, from a hardware standpoint, are there some interesting kind of integrations, applications? Like, does that allow better back-end processing, better data collection? Like, what is the tie-in for AI for someone like you guys?
Yeah, I mean, we've used AI since the beginning of our company. We just don't market it like I think some of the other companies do.
Yeah.
It's definitely, I mean, it definitely makes our robot possible. Like we do need some of these more complex models in order to be able to have a robot perceive the environment and do our jobs correctly. We even develop models for doing accuracy correction, like making the robots more accurate in the field, which is, I think, an interesting use of it. When it comes to hardware designs, I would say that it's not something we've explored actively yet. I know we like tried some generative designs like grippers back in the day, but it didn't really spell such great results. That's I think still a little bit of a challenging area is getting like these type of models to really understand like physics. Um,
I think just the logical aspect of the design tools is somewhat lacking. I'm sure it's the same in architecture as well. I mean, it comes up with a very sexy plan, and then it's like, well, how do I manufacture this or how do I build it? It's like, well, you can't.
yeah. Oh, one other tidbit I will throw out to listeners though is I think one of the things about like physical like AI with construction, one of the biggest challenges is just gonna be lack of data because it's very hard to get on construction sites to collect data. And when you collect data, you have to collect it in a way that it's meant to be used. Like if I just have a robot drive around site, like with a LiDAR, a lot of that data can be used for some applications, but let's say like I want to do like some specific thing, like I want to clear out this foam, that data is not actually going to be very useful for that specific application. And so making it easier for if people really want to support this to make it easier to develop AI for construction, one of the things is just making it easier to get on construction sites to actually collect this data. I think that that's going to be something that will really change the industry.
So is that like a partner request? Like, hey, more companies, we're willing to come out there and just start looking at stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's not like, it's just like giving up time and access, right? Like it doesn't even need to be like paying people like one way or
It,
I mean,
it, it is it is it is it is fascinating, and I wonder how good we are at sharing information in the construction industry rather than sort of keeping it close to our chest. Conley smiling, I love it. Or is it is it total chaos management? Is it just we got so much other stuff going on? I can't deal with one more thing. I think it's the latter, frankly. I think it's the latter.
But what I think is interesting is I think increasingly we've thought a lot about um, onboarding trade partners, right? From a GC standpoint, at least, in terms of how to make someone's, I spent time building data centers in the Midwest, and we had so many people come through the door. We would think a lot about the experience of, okay, they come on the job site. How do they quickly get oriented to the culture, the information, project data that they needed to, security requirements, etc. But we're coming into an age where that's going to be true for hardware coming onto the job site, right? And so, how do we think about um, giving access to a robot coming on that needs to understand the model, that needs to understand, drawing requirements and all the different security parameters. So it is kind of a new age in that way.
I, I don't want to answer for them, but I think it's just, are companies even prepared or know how to give access, just to share easily? And I don't know if they do.
I think a big
Well,
aspect of it is mitigated liability at the end of the day,
what do you
where
mean by that? What do you mean by that?
people are willing to share, their project documentation or BIM models with you, but they won't accept any issues that arise from the usage of said
Oh,
models.
you or,
I
or
think,
or how about, wait a minute, you're withholding the fact that that my tolerances aren't actually being met, and my QC reports didn't pick up on that. Like, this is a big, yeah.
hmm
Yeah,
exactly.
liability. So it just goes back to liability.
Exactly. And I think, as a new technology solutions provider, many companies similar to us, I mean, the buck kind of stops with us at liability. I mean, we're willing to take chances just because that's the nature of the startup. But I think if there was a more cohesive environment around the integration of technology into the existing workflows, the benefits would be substantial. I mean,
Hmm.
it would
No,
clean up
no
a
doubt.
lot more of the project than just what the robot's working on. I mean, it happens
No
on
doubt.
every project, or someone's using a rev from 6 months ago. It's not even the most recent rev. It hasn't been updated. Using the wrong components, things are in the wrong spots. It's just a fragmented communication, but I do think robotics kind of unlocks that consolidation of information where, in order for the robot to work, you all need to be working on the same plan. And if you do, it can work great.
Yeah. I mean, I think what you're pointing at is like when we're talking about really end of the spectrum type technologies being integrated in these sites, they get a lot of maybe the press, but if you're not doing the basics right, you're missing out on some things, right? And I think just the flow of information, there isn't enough intentionality spent on that. And I think that's one of the big differences with Europe. I mean, Europe, a project of any real size has information managers that are assigned to the project that just think about the common data environment and think about
Oh
the
my
flow
God.
of data between the different entities. And so I think that's a great point.
But, Stephen, not to downplay who we're interviewing now, but I'd love to interview an information. You
Right?
know, oh my gosh.
I mean,
I mean,
hopefully we're talking Europe, so maybe they're just like a bureaucrat that doesn't actually do anything. But but I'm hopeful. Listen, my
it's
European,
fascinating.
any of our European listeners, don't take that the wrong way. I
Okay,
mean,
so
take it
Just
exactly how I meant it. But
just kicked off 500K of that $1 million listening base you got.
that's right. We
let's
just
go.
got canceled in Europe. So, but I know we're winding down. I think what I do want to ask you guys though is we like to do a little bit of reflection. So, if you guys could go back day one of Raise Robotics after what you guys have learned, what would you tell yourself? Gary, go.
Uh, what would I tell myself? I think I think actually, yeah, one of the things I've learned is to be a lot more patient. I think,
Mm.
yeah, I think like as like an early stage founder, like everything's kind of on fire, and sometimes you make like very reactive decisions. But I think I would tell myself like with some of these decisions, like just take your time a bit and like really make sure you're talking to everybody and like being a lot more thoughtful. Like yeah, that's probably what I would say.
How many years did it take you to figure that out?
Probably two, I think.
Okay, well, I think you're faster than most. Good job. All right,
That's good.
Conley.
Yeah. I don't. Being in a startup, you get to work with a lot of different levels of people. Like it exposes you to a lot of C-suite people that I never would have met in my life had it not been for the company. And when we were early, I always found it extremely intimidating. And you kind of got to put on this persona that you've been here before. You know what you're doing, but we don't. So I think the one thing that's always stuck true to me is just being authentic, be yourself, and at the end of the day, people are just people. It doesn't matter what their title is. We're all the same at the end of the day. So that would be my advice to myself: just be yourself.
Amen.
That is a banger of a message. Yeah, I
Preach.
think you're spot on though. Like I think the older you get, the more you realize that no one really has it figured out, and everyone's just kind of going through the motions. So that is, and I think like I think your message to the younger and the next generation is really poignant, which is if you're heading into a GC, like I keep saying this, like the incumbents are not going to disrupt this industry. It's going to be someone who comes in armed with a good idea and maybe an underdeveloped prefrontal cortex to just go and take the risk and then see what happens, you know? So I appreciate what you guys are doing. Lars, anything else before we go?
No, it's fantastic. Totally appreciate you guys' transparency and authenticity. We'll make sure people know where to find you. And yeah, just keep up the good work, man. Keep up the good work.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.